The Noble PR is the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of IEMs. It's a universal in-ear earphone which has a switch that lets you choose between what Noble calls a pure sound signature and a reference sound signature. I've had 1 week on a listening tour with the Noble PR, and do I think that the Noble PR is a noble effort to deliver two different analytical sound signatures in the same package, or is it an IEM with a $699 gimmick? You're watching Lachlan Likes a Thing, and let's find out. Hey everyone, Lachlan here, and welcome to Lachlan Likes a Thing, the show where I take a thing and see whether or not I like it. Now, if you can't tell from my voice at the moment, I've got a bit of a flu, so please forgive me if I sound a little bit off, and that's also why I've slowed down the videos a bit. But I do have to make this one video because I'm on an Australian listening tour for the Noble PR, and it's only I only have this for 1 week. This was organized by Noble Audio and DMark0 over at HeadFi. Now, recently I launched a crowdfunding campaign on Patreon, and as part of that, I've decided to stop accepting and requesting new review units. This is a review I agreed to do before I made that decision, and since I've made that commitment, let's get on with the show. Since I've only had 1 week with these, this is really not going to be a full review. It's only going to be a first impressions review. There were a bunch of things that I didn't really have time to test out with these. So let's start with the build quality of the Noble PR. And, you know, I have to say the Noble PR does have a really nice build to it. It's got a solid plastic shell. It's got these curious little pentalobe gold-plated screws on the faceplate, and I wish I knew what would happen if you unscrewed them, but I'm not about to do that with a review unit. The IEM is very lightweight. It's quite small in size. It has detachable cables with the standard kind of 2-pin connector, and it's got a lightweight braided cable. They are very comfortable earphones because they are small in size and quite lightweight, but they do have a thicker than average nozzle. So if you have a look at that, that might be a problem with some people with smaller ear canals. Now, I can't really talk about the isolation of the Noble PR because I didn't really have a chance to use it outside all that much. But on the faceplate of the Noble PR, you can see the thing that gives the Noble PR the rabbit in the hat. It has a switch that lets you choose between two different configurations. Now, in the switched up mode, it is a 240 ohm earphone. This is called P mode, and this is what Noble calls pure. And then when you switch down, it goes into 30 ohm R mode, which is what Noble calls the reference mode. Now, one of the things that I wasn't able to determine is how the driver configuration on the Noble PR actually works, because Noble states that in the 240 ohm P mode it uses 2 balanced armature drivers, and on the 30 ohm R mode it uses 1 balanced armature driver. Now, Noble says that there are 2 separate configurations and there are dedicated crossover networks for each configuration. So what I really want to know is, does that mean that the 2 modes are completely separate so that no one single balanced armature driver is used in both modes? That's what Noble is kind of implying, and if that's true, essentially this means that the Noble PR is 2 completely different in-ear earphones crammed into the same earphone, which is sort of remarkable given how lightweight the PR is. So you can look at this idea of a switchable IEM in 2 ways. Number one, you can look at it as that you are getting a $699 IEM with a hardware equalizer that lets you switch between 2 different signatures depending on your mood. Or number 2, you are paying $699 for 2 different in-ear earphones, except that you are only really getting 1.5 of an IEM, and that IEM has a moving part which is probably more likely to break than your average earphone. It all kind of depends in the end on how the Noble PR sounds. And here's the doozy, I don't really like how the Noble PR sounds at all. Now, the Noble PR is described as a purist earphone, which lets you switch seamlessly between 2 different interpretations of what detailed really means, and here are kind of things that you haven't heard before. What this really means in practice is that in both the P and R configurations, the Noble PR has been tuned very aggressively to put a great deal of emphasis on the treble and upper mid-range. And in both configurations, it sounds very fast, it sounds very clean and very detailed, like any balanced armature earphone should. In P mode, the male vocals and lower mid-range are somewhat more recessed, which makes things sound more spacious. In R mode, the vocal range is lifted a little more and things sound a bit more intimate. But in both modes, the treble is splashy and sibilant, and the mids are quite forward, and I just find the sound a bit brash and shouty. Now, in both modes, there is a real lack of bass linearity or extension. Now, I've read quite a few reviews that say that the Noble PR has bass, but it won't please bass heads. But I'm actually getting really tired of how often I read that description in IEM reviews, because I've realized it's kind of an offhand way to kind of dismiss an entire set of frequencies. The Noble PR doesn't have neutral bass. It has less bass than IEMs that I would consider as having neutral sub-bass and bass quantities, like the VSonic GR07, the Sony MDR7550, the Newforce Primo 8, etc., etc. With the Noble PR, the lack of bass extension means that everything actually comes out somewhat tinny, and instruments like pianos and drums sound lifeless and unnatural because they lack a real depth to the sound. Now, sure, it sounds detailed in the high frequencies, but that's a bit like saying that removing the green and blue pixels from an LCD screen make it produce the color red with more detail. Now, I know that some people love this kind of signature because it's also the same kind of signature that the Etymotic ER4S or something like the Audio-Technica ATH-CK10 has. And I think that although these aren't my preferred sound signatures, I think those earphones are great, and I can see why you might like a more analytical signature. But even if you do like those IEMs, they are individually less than half the price of the Noble PR. And while I wish I had the time to directly compare those two with the Noble PR, my first impression is that the PR doesn't sound all that much better than either of those two. So for $699, you are basically getting two IEMs that have the sound quality of two different $200 balanced armature in-ear earphones, which both have the same kind of analytical signature. And at least when you pay $699 for another multi-balanced armature earphone, you're at least paying for extra armatures to fill in the gaps in the frequency range. So I have to say that personally, I think the Switch is a bit of a gimmick. Now, this product would make more sense to me if the Switch let you choose between two completely different signatures. But then again, I would rather spend money on two separate $350 IEMs, considering that $350 nowadays gets you incredibly good dynamic driver IEMs or very, very good sounding multi-balanced armature or hybrid designs. So I can't really say that I like the Noble PR. While it's nicely built and it sounds nice enough, I can't shake the feeling that for $699, you're really paying extra for nothing except more mechanical complexity, which probably makes it less reliable in the long run. Anyway, click the like button if you found this video helpful. You can talk to me on Facebook at facebook.com/LachlanLikesAthing and on Twitter at LachLikesAthing. Thanks to all my regular subscribers and happy listening.